Hey there, sports fans. This is Cal the Constructor. Welcome to Budget Dragon Highlander. In today's episode, we are looking ahead to the upcoming set of Dominaria. Listen to Matt, Gabe, and me pontificate on what we think is the best and worst of this set. Larry is on the disabled list today, but we hope to see him back in action soon. Please remember to like and subscribe. Also, if you like what you see, please help the channel by supporting us on Patreon and follow us on Twitter. Let's get to the game. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started right off the bat with the three new Planeswalkers for the set that aren't in the Planeswalker decks. We've got Jaya Ballard, Karn, and Teferi, the original heroes of Dominaria. And looking at the Jaya Ballard to get things kicked off, I don't really like this card. The +1 is okay, but I don't like the limitation of having to spend the mana on instants and sorceries. The second +1, I can see a lot of players liking that just because anytime you can loot, it's a good time. The -8 is broken as all get out, so maybe if you're running 5-color walkers and you can get Jaya out with the doubling season, maybe. But I don't see me putting this in any of my mono red lists.
I think this has great value because if you put her in Firesong and Sunspeaker deck, her +1 for the mana is really good. The other part of that, the new Wizard Commander, she's 1 red and a blue, and she gets +1/+1 for the instants and sorceries. I think she sees play in that too. So I think she has value.
I'll agree with you, Matt, on the Firesong and Sunspeaker. Like, if she was in a combo deck with those two, that could have potential to be pretty mean. My biggest thing is that not only is she a 5-drop, you still have to take at least 4 more turns before you can pop that ultimate ability. So, I mean, yeah, she's cool. I just think, she also has a big target on her, especially when she gets anywhere near 8 counters.
A lot of truth to that. Moving on to Karn. I've heard that this is going to make the professor thinks this is going to make a splash in Modern. I can certainly see that. I think this is going to be really nasty in Standard, especially if anybody's running anything with vehicles or treasures or, Voltron, anything that has a lot of artifacts in it. This is going to be really nasty. It's running at about $30 pre-order, and I don't see that going down anytime soon. So it's definitely not going to be something that we play with a lot just because of budgetary constraints. But what an amazing card. I mean, you're definitely going to be able to draw 2 cards. Your opponent gives you one of them right away. The other one you're probably going to get later in the game. There's just a lot of value on this card.
Yeah, I agree. The problem is it's $30, and the only way it's going to go down in price is if it never sees play in Modern because the other card is just so good. But I don't see that happening. So while I love this card, I'm probably never going to play him.
And I have to second and third that motion because, yeah, he looks and does some really neat stuff. I especially enjoy the artwork on there. But, yeah, he's definitely meant for a deck that if you've got a lot of money, put him in there. If you don't, probably not so much.
And last but certainly not least, the Teferi Hero of Dominaria. This one is coming in pre-order at about $15. And I definitely think it would be worth that if you've got a little bit of cap in your budget for any kind of a deck that has a control feature in it and is running white and blue. I've got a Jeskai list that this would have a perfect home in. Draw power is always good. Untapping lands to be able to hold up a counter spell at the end of your turn is always good. Being able to put stuff on top of its owner's library third from the top. So if it's indestructible, who cares? Stick it in your library. Good luck trying to find it. And then the emblem is just stupid powerful if you've got an ability to draw extra cards.
I agree with that. I guess the best part about this for me is on turn 5, coming in and you're going to +1 them probably to get those 2 untapped lands for hopefully a counter spell. It's just another target. Yeah, I can see if it stays around long enough to get that emblem, that's cool, but I just don't see it happening. So yeah, I see it having a little bit of play, but not a whole lot.
I mean, personally, I really like this card, especially for any kind of white-blue control. It has certainly a lot of potential, but that amount of potential also, like I've said before, puts a big target on its back. If you can keep it out there, more power to you. You're going to make a lot of people really, really mad, and especially for a $15 card, I think it's worth it.
Moving right along into the legendary creatures, we've gotten quite a few legendary creatures in this set. They said they're going to have a legendary in every single pack, which I think is aggressive. Um, there's a lot of good and a lot of bad on this page. Leading right off with Baird, Steward of Argive. I mean, Pillow Fort is great, and the more effects like this you have, the better. Just because if you're trying to put up a defensive deck, you want to have as many different propaganda effects as possible. But I definitely don't see me making a mono white deck with this guy as the commander. I mean, there's better humans, there's better soldiers, there's better mono white. I just don't see it.
I definitely see him as one of the 99 in the deck, but not a commander himself.
And yeah, totally. He's a good card, but he's definitely not a commander, I think.
Joda Archmage Eternal at first looks Jeskai. Turns out he's 5 colors because of the way that color identity works. I mean, it's a Fist of Suns on a stick. And being able to know that if you have any kind of ramp, which you'd better have ramp in a 5-color deck, you're going to be able to get him out on turn 3 and probably start busting out shenanigans on turn 4. I mean, turn 4 Kozilek is stupid.
I don't particularly care for this card. Yeah, he's a wizard, so you can see that, but 5 colors for... I don't like him.
Like our first speaker mentioned, if you are running a 5-color deck and you've got enough ramp in there, you can literally start busting out some mean anything, really, early on the game, and that's just dumb. But that's a lot of ifs before you can get there.
Heard. Moving on to Daragaz Reincarnated. When I saw that there was going to be a Daragaz in this set, I got really excited because I'm the legendary dragon guy. And then I saw what it did, and I was really let down by this card. I don't think I'm putting this in my dragons deck. I don't think if I wanted to make a Jund deck, I would use this guy. If he died, I would much rather just stick him back in the command zone and then the next turn try to replay him. And even if it had suspend counters on him, there are ways to remove suspend counters, but these egg counters, there's just nothing to do with them.
For a 7-drop legendary dragon, I'm not impressed by this card in the least.
Yeah, it's just it leaves me wanting in a lot of ways. So I probably wouldn't use him.
Marwyn the Nurturer looks like a really good include in just about every mono green elf deck ever. The whenever elf enters the battlefield is a really powerful effect. +1/+1 counters can be abused to an annoying degree, and any kind of green mana ramp is always good. So I really like this one, especially where it's only got 1 green in the mana cost. It's going to be easy to splash if you're trying to run, say, white-green elves or Bant elves or something like that. I think this is a really good card. I don't know that I run this as a commander just because there's better elf commanders, but ooh boy, is she good.
She's definitely an auto-include in every elf deck, because the fact that if you can just play two elves the turn after and she can tap for 3, that makes her really dumb. So I see her as an auto-include, but I would never see her as a commander herself.
Yeah, anybody doing anything with any sort of elf tribalness, this card should really go in there, regardless of if it's monocolored or not. because you're tapping for green whatever her power is equal to, and that's really really helpful. Especially if you even have just one extra black laying around, that leaves open the potential for any kind of destruction spell. But that's pontificating at this point. But yeah, if you're doing elves, she needs to be in there.
Demon Lord Bells and Lock. I mean, 6 mana for a 6/6 flying trample is really good. Draw power in black is always really good, and I mean, taking 1 damage for being able to get X number of cards in your hands is going to be fine. 'Cause, I mean, how many non-land cards are you going to have in your deck in a row with a converted mana cost higher than 4? So I don't see anybody killing themselves with a Demon Lord Bells and Lock. I don't really like it because it does it only when he enters the battlefield and not every turn. I would prefer to have every turn draw power, but I definitely see this as being, better than average. I mean, it's a good card. Elder is a keyword I wish they'd quit using just because I'm old fashioned. But if I were going to make a demons list, this guy goes right to the top of my list.
I think it's very good. There's a couple ways you can get around the enter the battlefield, resto angel, and flashing it in and out, stuff like that. But yeah, 6/6 flying trample for 6. That's just solid all the way around.
Yeah, Demon Lord Bells and Lock, he's got some neat stuff, and he's got some potential, especially if you're making a solo demons deck. Yeah, definitely put him in there. As far as, if you're just doing like a regular, well, not a regular, but if you're doing a black deck in general, then that's questionable, but I still personally like him.
Lyra Dawnbringer is a little bit expensive just because everybody's really excited to finally have an Angel Lord. I mean, look at all of those keywords. 5/5 for 5, flying, first drink, lifelink. It's giving all your other angels +1/+1 and lifelink. That's just value town. I would definitely see me brewing an Angels deck in the future using this as the commander. One of the problems with Angels has been that because they all have the auto include flying, they're usually overpriced for their power and toughness. But this gives them the boost and the lifelink to make them finally worth it. I could definitely see running this.
I agree all the way around. Just all the keywords, the +1/+1 to everything else in lifelink. 5 mana, she's a solid commander herself. I think she's an auto include if you're going to run an Angels list anyways, but yeah, for 5 she's really good.
Honestly, this card kind of makes me want to make an Angels deck just so I can have her as the commander.
Evra Halcyon Witness, I think, raised a lot of ears for different combo players, especially anybody running any kind of an Aloro list. I mean, it looks like there's the potential for brokenness, but I just see too many examples of the ability to break this combo. I mean, if you get a stifle, you can prevent somebody from switching the power toughness back. If you're able to tap down all of somebody's lands and then deal with it, that's going to be nasty. If you're able to do anything with split second, this combo gets broken up. So I just don't see this card going very far. I'm sure I'm going to see somebody playing with it one time or another, and it's probably going to be dumb. But there's just so much removal in this format that it's easy to deal with.
I agree all the way around. Maybe you included it in a combo list, but I personally am never going to go to the trouble to make that work.
Yeah, the only thing I would want to use this card for is... actually, never mind. I don't think I would want to use this card.
Muldrotha the Gravetide looks like it might be the best Sultai commander that they've ever printed. Josh Lee Kwai and Jimmy Long over at the Command Zone said this is the best card for commander printed in Dominaria, and I don't know that I'm ready to disagree with them. Because not only is it a Crucible of Worlds on a stick, but also you're able to recast every enchantment, artifact, planeswalker, creature. I mean, it's every turn you basically get a second hand in your graveyard, and so you spend all that time ditching stuff into the grave, which is really easy to do in those colors, and you don't have to cast extra spells to get them back. They just are there available to you. I absolutely love this card.
I think it's a great card for 6 mana, and the colors are right to make that work with the graveyard manipulation and all that. But I would definitely not jump in the boat of best commander in the set.
Yeah, for the color scheme and for the abilities that the card has, it's definitely suited well for that kind of play style using those 3 color combinations. I think you could cook up a mean deck using that as a commander.
Looking ahead to Multani Yavimaya's avatar, I see this thing going a long way too. I mean, green loves anything that says for each land you control. If you're using any kind of a green-black deck or a Sultai deck, you're gonna have lands in your graveyard. So then it's also able to take advantage of those. I mean, this has a real great home in my Gitrog monster deck, that's for sure. And then all of a sudden you're able to, it's got recursion built right on the card. I think this is a really solid legendary.
I agree. Maybe I'm a little partial because I'm making a deck with her right now, but with the inclusion of Blackblade Reforged, if you throw that Scythe, I forget the name of the Scythe, but then I'll do the +1/+1 for each land. Yeah, she's going to be a solid commander. Plus recursion on it is awesome, so you don't have to have fear throwing her in the graveyard as long as you have the 2 open mana for it.
Yeah, you guys have said it best. I really, really like this card.
And Stratus Scythe, by the way.
Stratus, I thank you.
Hey, look, kids, it's a new Squee, and it looks like this one is going to be annoying too. I could see somebody. Well, I don't see this getting any standard play. I don't think this is going to be getting any modern play because 1 and 2 red is really high for a 2/1. This isn't going to be the commander of a Goblins deck. I don't think I put this in a Goblins deck because there's so many better things you can be doing with 3 mana.
I may put him in a Goblins deck for kicks and grins, but I'm never going to use him as a commander, and I'm never going to expect much out of it.
Yeah, the biggest thing I can see this being used for is if you have no creatures in your hand, or at least the ones you do have are too expensive, and you're just kind of SOL, so just to be annoying, you're just like, oh yeah, look who's back on the battlefield for like the umpteenth millionth time.
Speaking of annoying, we're going to go on to Tetsuko Umezawa Fugitive. I do remember Toshiro Umezawa, the mono black legendary creature out of the Kamigawa block, who was pretty solid for any kind of kill spells. But this looks like it's going to be really dumb. I could see tossing this in the 99 of some sort of a Simic hexproof list. Swing in with my 1/1s or my 3/1s that can't be blocked, and then before damage, pump them up with some green spells for a little bit of an extra spice. I don't know that I make a mono blue list with this though, just because there aren't any pump spells.
I agree. It's one of the 99 for sure, and in a Sultai list that you're hoping to pump after everything's unblockable, but no, he's never going to see a command zone.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to agree with both of you guys. It's a good card, but I think it's best suited for a dual color deck, or it's best suited in combo with another color scheme. I think it would, if it were like a mono blue deck, probably not as effective as something else that might be able to pump out a bunch of tokens, with a power, a toughness of 1, make them unblockable and then pump them up afterwards, like Calvin said. But yeah.
I hadn't even thought about token strategies. That would be really dumb.
I mean, there's one card that I know of that pumps out a number of 3/1 soldier tokens with haste, and comboed with this, they're unblockable, and then buff them up after. Yeah, it can be ridiculous if played right.
Looking next to Yargle Glutton of Urborg, I think this card is hilarious. I almost want to. No, that's going too far. I could see me throwing this in a mono black deck for sure, just because a 9/3 is great. It'd be really easy to recur whenever somebody kills it. But just a big nasty frog is hilarious for flavor.
Yeah, it's gonna see listed as a recursion card. But yeah, the artwork is awesome. The flavor text is good, but he's not a commander.
It's a 9/3 for 5, and who wouldn't want a 9/3 for 5?
Truth. Torgar Famine Incarnate looks like a lot of fun. I like anything that has a way for me to make it cheaper to cast. And boy, does Black ever love sacrificing creatures. This makes its way into any mono black sacrifice strategy. This makes its way into white black aristocrats. And I think it's going to have a really good home in a lot of closing strategies, because it makes it so that instead of having to think about the combat math of trying to kill somebody, you're now thinking about the combat math of killing half of somebody, because you're able to round down their life. And especially if you're doing white black aristocrats, you're able to start bouncing it. So you get that ETB trigger. It's not an on cast, it's an on enter the battlefield. I could see this card getting abused pretty easily.
I agree with white black aristocrats, but for 8, he's probably not going to see command zone.
The only way I can see him being bad when he comes into play is if you're playing a 1-on-1 game, or if you're playing like a 3-on-3 or whatever it is. If everyone's life total is already less than half of their starting life total, is the only way I can see him being bad entering the battlefield.
Good spot on the rules text for starting life total. Thank you. Urgoros, the empty one. I don't like any bit of this card. It's a 6 mana 4/3 for flying. That's way too high. I mean, there was on the last page there was a 6/6 flying haste for 6. So I don't buy that. It has to deal combat damage to a player, but it doesn't have unblockable. It doesn't have fear. It doesn't have intimidate. I mean, it just has flying. It doesn't have trample. And to then have them discard a card at random, I don't like. There's too many ifs in this card for me.
For 6 mana, it not having haste, and it's saying at random, I could see paying 6 and you being able to choose a card. That way, it'd be able to look at your opponent's hand whenever you needed to. But yeah, this card's way too expensive and not strong enough for what it is.
Yeah, like Calvin said, there are a lot of ifs with this card, especially for it being a 6-drop with 4/3 and flying only. I feel like there are better things out there that can do the same thing, but better.
Valduk, Keeper of the Flame. Looks like I like that it's 3 mana. It's good to be able to get it out early and then start buffing them up, in the mid game. A lot of creatures that would have a similar effect. You're thinking of the white cat creatures. Raksha Golden Cub and stuff like that are 6 and 7 drops. So I like that this guy is 3 mana. Get him out there early. Start putting those elementals out with haste. Looking right above it at Tetsuko Umezawa, all of a sudden you start making a red-blue Voltron. That could get really nasty really quickly with those unblockable 3/1 elementals. I could see this card going a long way.
I love this card. I've debated on making this my commander for our Tiny Leaders week. Because as long as you keep getting auras out each turn, it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, this was the card I had in mind when we were reviewing Tetsuko earlier. Like, if this combination can be allowed to happen, especially if you've got a lot of auras and equipments on Valduke, dear God, I feel sorry for the person they're attacking.
Yeah, that has the potential to get really nasty. Whisper Blood Liturgist. Same thing we were saying with Torgar. This has a really good home in any black deck that needs to sacrifice creatures. This is reminiscent of an older card whose name is escaping me right now that had a similar sacrifice a creature, return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield effect. I really like this card, especially if you're playing, any kind of a list where you can get a bunch of little minions out on the battlefield and then recur something like a Yargle. That becomes very worth it very quickly.
I believe this sees a lot of play because of the way you can get creatures back. Sacrifice two rats or whatever to go get a Yargle. That seems really good to me, but I don't necessarily see him as a commander. You could make it work, but I wouldn't play it.
Definitely a useful card for any kind of, in my opinion, specifically mono black deck, because they like to pump out a lot of tokens, be it zombies or rats or whatever. Now, if it were a commander, I think that there are more cards or cards better suited for being a commander, but this would definitely go in a deck if I were making a mono black deck.
Zahid Jinn of the Lamp is probably my favorite Jinn they've ever printed. I think this is definitely a dark horse. I can see it being really easy to get this guy out on as fast as turn 2. And all of a sudden you have a 5/6 flyer while everybody else is playing tap lands. This isn't going to be an expensive card because this isn't going to see any play in any constructed formats. So I would definitely see making a mono blue aggro list from out of nowhere using this guy as the commander.
This was going to be my alternative to best commander they've printed so far. I think he is outstanding because even with commander tax, he's still coming out for 4 and a artifact, which there's enough artifact lands or anything that's indestructible to make this really worth the while of a 5/6 with flying.
I'm not as familiar with Jinns as probably the other two are. However, this does have potential. As if you were to use this as a commander for any kind of mono blue deck, especially for an aggro deck, that could be very neat.
You've got Arvad the Cursed. 5 mana for a 3/3 Death Touch lifelink isn't great. I wish it said all legendary creatures you control get +2/+2. That way he's a 5/5. But I mean, I guess he's an uncommon. So what are you gonna do? This is gonna be great in something where you are gonna get a lot of legendary creatures. I don't play this as a commander because it's too expensive to start out, and white black doesn't have the best ramp. But this is definitely something that I would look at. I'm not going to put it in my Legendary Dragons deck because there's better buff for that list in specific. But I think this is an okay card.
I think Arvad sees some play in some low budget all legendary decks, but him as a commander, he doesn't do anything for vampires. He does very little for knights as well. So yeah, I think he sees play in the 99, but not as a commander.
I would have to agree. He's too specific to fit into a lot of things. While, Death Touch and Lifelink, can't really go wrong with that. but you would have to specifically be making a legendary creatures deck or a way to make all your creatures legendary, which I don't even think is possible. Um, yeah, he seems a little too specific to be that useful, but he is neat if you can find that use for him.
Next is Fire Song and Sun Speaker. This is going to be the Buy a Box promo. I think Wizards reached a little bit trying to do a Buy a Box promo that was not available in packs. I mean, the last few Buy a Box promos have been extremely lackluster. They've been completely unuseful in pretty much any format. So it's nice to see them at least trying to print a good card. But I don't like that this won't be available in non-foil. It won't be available in packs. So we'll have to see what that does to the market for it. But the effects are really cool. I mean, it's, Minotaur. It's nice to see a Minotaur. Red and white instants and sorceries get lifelink. We've seen on a Jeskai card giving all of your instants and sorceries lifelink. But then the second effect makes, white gain life spells get a little bit of a bad reputation in Commander just because we start at 40 life. So who really wants to be gaining life? But being able to turn those into bolts is a really nice effect. So I think this is going to get quite a bit of play starting out, but we'll have to see if it sticks around.
To answer your question, though, Allura wants to gain life. But Firesong and Sunspeaker, I think you could make an interesting deck with it. But we'll have to wait and see how much it's going to cost after the fact that no one's going to get it for the vast majority.
I'm not gonna lie. The first time I read the abilities on Firesong and Sunspeaker, I got a little bit of a nerd boner because I was all about, red instants and sorceries give you lifelink, plus the additional ability, and then I saw the cost of the card, and I was just like, ah. So I mean, yeah, it's pretty neat. I think personally it would be more effective if you were to split both of those into separate creatures and then make them partner commanders that would do the same thing if both of them are on the battlefield. But, as it stands, a 6-drop, 4/6, you're waiting a long time before you can do a lot of stuff, and I just think it's not worth it in the end, even though I really like the ability.
I like Adelies, the Cinder Wind. It's nice that they're bringing Wizards back. A 2/2 flying haste for 3 is always good. But then this other ability where you're able to buff the team anytime you cast an instant or sorcery. Um, I don't know if Wizard Tribal is going to make a comeback in Standard, but I definitely see it making a comeback in Commander because a lot of people are going to jump all over this, especially with how easy it is to grab cards with prowess from the cons block. I think that this card has the potential to get quite nasty really quickly.
I would agree. The only thing I would add is it also fits tiny leaders, and buffing the team like that with instants and sorceries would be kind of silly in tiny leaders, making it really good. So we'll just wait and see.
I mean, to not have this card in a Wizards deck would be stupid. And if you were to not have this as a commander in any form for a Wizards deck would be silly. Now, that being said, I'm not sure all the Wizards that are out there, but this would be a really good one to have as a commander.
The next one is Tiana, Ship's Caretaker. It's another 5-mana 3/3. Is that the going rate for uncommons these days? 5-mana 3/3 with 2 keywords.
Must be.
I don't like having to pay 5 mana for 3/3s because on turn 5 I need to be doing more with it. But it's nice to be able to get that recursion for auras and equipments. It's nice to be able to put them back into your hand after somebody blows them up. I see this working a lot for anybody that's running Lightning Greaves and is tired of them getting blown up. So I think this sees a lot of play. I don't know that this is going to be necessarily a commander for most people. But it definitely it becomes competition in the Boros guild.
I 5/5 for or 5 mana for a 3/3. I don't like her. I think she's much better for auras than equipment though. There's a lot of ways to go get artifacts back out. But being able to go get your ethereal armor that somebody blows up out from underneath your feet would be really nice.
I don't look at it that you're spending 5 mana for a 3/3 flying and first strike. I look at it more so you're spending a red, white, and 1 for whenever your auras and enchantments get blown up, and an extra 2 for the creature with those abilities, to be perfectly honest, in my perspective. But I mean, I look forward to using her. I'm building a deck with her right now and testing around with it. If things line up right, it can be mean with what happens. But yeah.
Green Blue Merfolk gets a new commander with Tatiova. I can definitely, if somebody doesn't have the money to spend on a Cumena, I see this definitely being a good stand-in. But hey, look, it's a 5 mana 3/3 that doesn't even have keywords. But it's green, so you'll be able to ramp. So the whenever a land enters the battlefield trigger, I can see that happening quite regularly. If you did have some money to spend on burgeoning or Oracle of Muldiah, and you're able to start getting extra land drops every turn, and then you're drawing more cards to replace those lands, I can see that getting a little silly. Merfolk is always going to be good. I could definitely see building maybe a brawl list with this, just to keep it under budget. But that would probably be about as far as I would go with it.
Yes, I could see it getting really expensive in the commander itself, but I like the card. Merfolk is awesome, but yeah, the gain 1 life draw card on landfall is really nice too.
My only issue is that this deck would kind of hint at somebody putting a lot more mana into the deck than probably as would be useful. But, I mean, it has potential for a bunch of neat things. Yeah.
Slimefoot the Stowaway seems to be a big favorite on Twitter. It's another great whenever a creature dies trigger. I mean, it has to be a sapling in this specific circumstance, but the saplings goes way back to the old times of Magic, so it's nice to see them bring that creature type back. It's nice to have something that is a mana dump, because you don't have to tap him for that sapling creature. So if you start being able to churn out a lot of mana, you're going to be able to just pump out a bunch of sapling creatures with this guy, and then start sacrificing to drain your opponents. So I haven't looked for the combo with this yet to try to do infinite, but I'm certain that it's there. And I can see it. I can see people hating you for it, because at 3 mana, this guy is significantly better.
It has great upside for 3 mana. However, like you said, somehow there's an infinite combo out there. I don't have it in my mind yet, but I mean, it's a good commander. I wouldn't necessarily say it's great though.
In my opinion, the biggest drawback of the card is if you're going to put him in any sort of commander deck, he would kind of have to be the commander, because that ability forces you to do that. But I think that's also his biggest strength at the same time. I'm almost 99% sure that there's that infinite combo out there for creating and sacking saprolings. So do it to it.
Actually, it's pretty easy. So you use um, the altar. I can't think of the name. The one that says sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless to your mana pool. And then you have a token doubler, any of the token doublers that lets you put 2 tokens in. So once you have 2 saplings in, you can sacrifice the 2 saplings to create 4 mana, which then will let you create a green sapling, double the tokens. You now have 2 more saplings, sack them for 4 more mana. That's your infinite loop, and then you're dealing 1 damage to each opponent and gaining infinite life. So turn 4 game, I think turn 4 game, pretty sure. Yeah, that's gonna get out of hand real fast. I apologize, internet, if you didn't already know about that combo.
You build it and I'll watch.
Right.
I mean, just put that down as your leader. Let somebody punch you in the face and then walk away because they've conceded from the game.
This next grouping of uncommon commanders has a little bit more variety to it. So the Rakdos is not hurting for good commanders. However, I really like this this edition. Flash is a much more powerful ability than I think any of the other 5 drops have. So you can develop a board state, leave up your mana when you know that your opponent has a board wipe in hand, and then on the end of your opponent's turn, flash this in and get the rest of your board back. That can be really powerful. I think that this is probably, of the 5 drop uncommon commanders in this set, this is probably my favorite.
I would agree, because you could let them sit in your command zone and just build your board state, and let it get big and wait for somebody to do Armageddon or whatever, and then immediately respond with, okay, well, that was fun. I have everything back. So, plus Rakdos with Flash is something you don't see every day.
Yeah, very, very true. You don't see a lot of Rakdos with Flash. I really like the abilities on the card. It just seems a little specific that you are waiting on somebody to board wipe everything, and then heaven help you and God pray that you have 5 mana available ready to throw them down if you need to. And then I just know that that's going to happen, and then you're going to be in a multiplayer game, and then somebody else is going to board wipe the very next turn just out of sheer spite.
Well, in theory, he could be on the full board, and it could get board wiped, and then you could flash him in from your command zone right after it.
If you have the mana, that would just be disgusting and hilarious at the best time.
Rona, Disciple of Gix. I've also heard some people talking about this getting kind of dumb. So, the ETB, exile a historic card from your graveyard. If you're playing blue-black properly, you should have plenty to choose from in your graveyard. But then being able to cast the cards exiled with Rona is what is going to be really good. So you're able to make sure that you save cards in your graveyard from graveyard hate. So if somebody's trying to run a Bajuka Bog or something like that, you can prevent them from just completely ruining your combos. I don't know that I run this as a commander just because I don't think the ability is that powerful. But if I was trying to run any kind of a combo list that had these colors, this is probably going to go in there pretty quickly just to make sure that I can keep my combo pieces for later.
I don't think she makes a very good tiny leader, just because I can't think of a great way to pull off any combo with her in that format. But yes, if I'm running a dimmer deck or something that includes blue and black, I think she's good to save all of your pieces, but she's not necessarily commander for me.
I think the saving grace for this card is the fact that it is, a 3-drop and it's a 2/2 with that ability. Because even if it were a 5-drop with, I don't know, 2 keywords at the top, it would have to be like hexproof or something ridiculous, hexproof and flash or something ridiculous like that, for me to even think about using that. So I think the saving grace for this card is that it is a 3-drop as it is.
I think the other saving grace of this is that the artwork tried to make a love child out of Domino and Cable, and that's what you get.
I'll allow it.
Shanna Sisay's Legacy looks like it should be a pretty good card. 2 mana is good. It's not exactly hexproof because it can still be the target of spells your opponents control. So this still dies to every kind of removal that there is. So that's a major drawback for me. But turn 1 you play a creature, turn 2 you play this, and then you're off to the races to try to build board state, which green white loves to do. I could see using this in Tiny Leaders. I could see using this in Brawl. I could definitely see using this in full commander because one of the downsides for a lot of green-white commanders is that their mana cost is too high. So if I wanted to build green-white and I don't have the money for Risk the Redeemed, I think this starts to really move into that area.
Yeah, I definitely think she's the cheaper way to get in and faster way to get into Selesnya. The +1/+1 for each creature you control is awesome. As soon as you start laying tokens down, she gets better and better. Yeah, she has value all the way around.
I mean, I like the card, but yeah, if you can plop it down on the second turn, like Calvin said, you're off to the races to just throw down as many creatures as humanly possible, and just blah, 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 blah.
I really like that they tried to make kicker a relevant keyword with Halar the Fire Fletcher. I'm going to save my comments on kicker for when we actually cover that in our review. But this is certainly trying. I mean, it's a 3-mana 3/3 with trample, which is good. It's an elf, which is good. And then it has a relevant ability for whenever you kick something. So, oh boy, is it trying. I could see probably trying to do something with putting a lot of +1/+1 counters on it and then kicking a spell late game to try to do a bunch of burn damage late, especially since it does it to each opponent. But otherwise, this is going to be a really good way to do green-red elves in Commander. I could see trying to buff this guy up really high with elves and then swinging in with trample and trying to do commander damage, as opposed to a go wide strategy like most elf decks do.
I actually really like this card, and not necessarily for the kicker spells that are in this set, but for all the other ones that are in red and green. Plus, it fits Tiny Leaders, and some of the kicker spells fit into Tiny Leaders as well. So yeah, I think the dealing damage to each opponent is real strong, and I actually like them.
Definitely, I like this commander for an elf deck. I love the idea with the +1/+1 counters, and then it deals damage equal to the number of counters on it to each opponent. So that could set up a nasty commander damage combo for any kind of multiplayer game. So I certainly like it.
I think Raf Kapashin Ship's Mage has the potential to be the most broken uncommon commander that they have in this set, because it has flash and it lets you cast your other historic spells as though they had flash. And if there's one thing that I've learned in all my games of Commander, if you can cast it at instant speed, it's already better. So I think that this has some real potential to warp a lot of games.
I'm a little biased because I'm going to use him as my brawl commander. And to be completely honest, the only reason I'm doing that is because he has flash, and in a constructed form, or in a limited format, he also has flying, which is really strong. But yes, I think he could get really silly really quickly.
I just think it's funny that like these 3 and 2 and 4 drop legendary creatures are almost more effective than their 5 drop counterparts, as far as abilities and effectiveness when they are first made available through casting. Now, as far as Wrath specifically, can't go wrong with a flash creature, especially if he's your commander. Flying, Nito Cheeto, 3/3 for a 4 drop. Fair trade off for the 2 abilities. But especially if you're running historic spells, definitely useful.
I think sagas become much, much better when I can cast them on my opponent's end step and then immediately get the 2 ability on my draw step before my opponent has time to react. That makes sagas significantly better. I could see running a lot of white-blue sagas in a Wrath Capuchin list. This next page might have the most hyped stuff on it. The legendary sorceries. I When I first heard that they were trying to do legendary sorceries, I wasn't sure how they were going to do it, and I really like the flavor of having to have a legendary creature or legendary planeswalker out. I like that they're more powerful than your average sorcery because you have to go through the extra step. And I can see these being almost an auto include in commander decks of the relevant colors for those flavor aspects because of that power level. Jaya's Immolating Inferno is just an amazing burn spell. I mean, you're able to choose 3 players, 3 planeswalkers, 3 creatures. You can mix it up. And if you're able to make us enough mana, this can get out of hand really quickly.
I really like this card. You play it in a Firesong deck, Firesong and Sunspeaker, it can get really silly. If you play it in a red-green ramp to get to the mana for it, you could theoretically kill the other 3 people sitting at the table. Yes, 2 red next, that's not too terribly expensive for me.
I think this card will benefit almost any deck it goes into if you're looking for burn damage. As a legendary sorcery, you have to have a legendary creature or planeswalker out on the battlefield. But as far as for what it does, I think that's very an effective trade-off. So I really like this card, and I think it will get a lot of use, and it has a lot of potential in any deck if you're looking for burn damage.
Looking next to Kamal's Druidic Vow, this reminds me a lot of Genesis Wave, where you're getting to look at the top X cards of your library. But the nice thing about this is that you're not looking at just creatures. You're able to get the lands and the permanents with converted mana cost X or less. So you're looking at all of your artifacts, you're looking at your planeswalkers, and if you're in green, you're going to be able to pump out a lot of mana. I can see people. I've seen a lot of infinite mana combos in green. I can see people putting their entire library onto the battlefield, and if you've got a Crater Hoof out, all of a sudden you're pumping the whole team, and that's game. I can see Kamal's Druidic Vow making a big splash in green decks.
I love this card for everything you just said it for. Yeah, it's great all the way around.
Yeah, I really, really like the card too. I love the idea of putting, any number of lands onto the battlefield. The only thing I just you would have to make sure that you've got a bunch of legendary permanent cards in your deck as well, which I'm pretty sure you should be able to find at some point. So I think it has potential to be very, very useful if you meet the criteria.
Karn's Temporal Sundering is definitely going into my Jeskai taking turns list. I mean, it has all the right stuff on it. It says take an extra turn. It says I can bounce something. Either I can bounce something to my hand that needs to be protected, or I can bounce something to my opponent's hand that needs to be removed. And then exile it when you're done with all that, because otherwise it gets really stupid. So they've started putting that on all the take extra turns stuff. But I like everything about this card.
And for 6 mana, doing all of that is really cheap. That's what makes this card so good for me.
Yeah, if you like taking multiple turns and you've got the right combos to set up, this is definitely effective for what you're trying to do. So I'm all about it.
I almost wept when I read Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. I do not care how much this card costs when it releases, because I will be purchasing one for my Legendary Dragons deck, because the 5 dragons that, according to this flavor text, conquered death to rule the living were the basis for me getting into Magic. So I will be purchasing this card, absolutely. I will be using this card because I use Scion of the Ur-Dragon, and so my whole deck is about putting legendary dragons into the battlefield, or I'm sorry, into the graveyard, and now they get to come out to the battlefield to play for a second time. This card is going to be absolutely nuts for me.
In all legendaries lists, which probably most 5-color decks are, yeah, it's an auto include.
Yeah, if you're running a lot of legendary permanents in your deck, let alone Calvin's Dragons deck, this should definitely go in there so you can try to do it at some point. Yeah, it's got a high mana cost, but if you've got a lot of legendary permanents in your graveyard, you should be fine paying that cost. Now, Calvin, I will say you wept when you read what this card does. I'm not even going to imagine what you did when you saw the artwork on the card, because that is just beautiful.
That is some good artwork. I also see this going into Super Friends decks now that all Planeswalkers are legendary. People are going to be ditching walkers into the yard, and then for 7 mana, which is easy to get to in this format, all of a sudden bring all of their friends back out to play for a second time. That's going to get really broken.
Yeah, having I own a Super Friends deck, putting Doubling Season out and just throwing everything out in the field that you can, not caring if it hits the graveyard or not, and then being able to play this, it makes it very worthwhile in a Super Friends deck.
Sadly, I think Urza's Ruinous Blast is probably the worst legendary sorcery they made, only because there are so many legendary permanents, especially in the Commander format. This doesn't hit Commanders, this doesn't hit Planeswalkers, and when I'm trying to board wipe, I'm usually trying to get rid of Planeswalkers and Commanders. I mean, this certainly has a home. I can see this getting a lot of play, but I'm probably not going to run it for those reasons.
It only being 1 white and 4 makes it a really good semi-accurate board wipe. But for every reason you said, Calvin, this sees no play in Brawl because everything right now is going to be legendary. This sees very little play in Commander because it's not hitting Commanders, it's not hitting Planeswalkers. So yeah, it has a place, I just don't know where it's at.
Yeah, I think you guys have said it best. There's other stuff that can be target more specifically for what might be needed. Unless for some god awful reason you're running up against way too many creature tokens like saprolings or zombies or something, and you just need to wipe them off there. This is the thing that I can think of, but other than that, I think that there are more useful cards out there. So as a legendary sorcery, I'm not that impressed.
Yawgmoth's Vile Offering is really astoundingly good. For 5 mana, I've used similar effects, and for 5 mana, you're usually looking at getting a creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So this being able to hit creatures or planeswalkers is already good, and then it also comes with a kill spell loaded onto it for a creature or a planeswalker. This is all of the good for me.
I agree with everything you said, and I was actually surprised this was not a 2 black and 4, because even at that cost I would have paid it.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't put a second additional black man on that casting cost. But I really, really like the specificity on the card. The only thing I'll say is be ready for it to be counterspelled. So I would just make sure you either have your own counterspells or some extra mana to tap in case you need to.
I really like this cycle of uncommon lands. The memorials to the heroes. I really like these, and their effects are really good. I know the green and the black one are going into my Gitrog monster yesterday, because the mana cost on the card is not terribly expensive. It enters tapped, but that's okay. You can play it on turn 1 or even turn 2, and you should be fine. And so I think these have a home in quite a few decks. Probably not every list, but especially if you need to get lands in your graveyard, these are good.
My favorite by far is the green one. To look at the top 5 for 3 mana, that's just really strong. The blue, paying 5 to draw 2 cards off of a land, I could see it used. It's not the best. And yeah, black is just really good too.
Yeah, I enjoy all of the lands. Especially the artwork on all 5 of them looks very, very fun. I'm a little disappointed by the Memorial to War. I mean, 5 to sacrifice that one and destroy another land. Yeah, there are some pretty pesky lands out there you don't want other people to have, but for that cost, I think they could have done better. But yeah, the other 4 are really, really neat. I would have to agree the blue and the black one are probably the most effective for their cost. Yeah, it's 5 mana for drawing 2 cards on Genius. But, I mean, by that point, I think you'd have enough to spare if you need 2 extra cards late game.
This next cycle, according to Gamepedia, is the MMM cycle. I think that's because it's the mana cost is 3 of the relevant color. So these are not going to go into most multicolor decks, but if you're, it reminds me of Theros when you were trying to build Devotion. They're already talking about Steel Leaf Champion making a big splash in Modern. I like all 5 of these. I think my favorite by far is the Tempest Djinn. That's going to go into my mono blue deck because all I run is basic islands, and so that guy is going to get really mean really late.
My favorite would probably be the Marshal and the Chain Whirler, because if you play the Marshal and Human Weenies, +1/+1 everything is awesome, and you're probably not running anything besides regular white. And then same could be said for Goblins. If you're running a Goblin deck, 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and each Planeswalker, that's really strong for 3 red.
Personally, I'd have to say my favorite of these 5 would be the Marshal. I think that could work potentially in any kind of combination you want to use it in. I mean, what's not to love about other creatures you control getting +1/+1? Yeah, you are paying 3 white mana for it, so that could hurt you, especially if you only have like 1 or 2 on deck. So you got to be ready for that. But that's probably my favorite. But Jin has the best late game potential, especially if you're doing basic lands like Calvin mentioned.
Well, there you have it, sports fans. Another one in the books. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit us up on Patreon and Twitter, and come back next week for the next episode of Budget Dragon Highlander.